Thanks for joining us at 10. I'm Mackenzie Davis. New questions tonight about transparency and potential conflicts of interest tied to the future of the former GM site in Janesville. A city council member is now raising concerns about a key figure involved in redevelopment planning, but county leaders say they don't see a problem. WMTV's Shayna Najawan joins us live in studio with what we're learning tonight. Shayna?
Mackenzie, this all centers on the GM Jatco redevelopment board guiding the future of the former GM site. We've reported on potential uses for the land, including a data center, but tonight the focus shifts to who is helping make those decisions.
When the discussions came about regarding a data center, we really didn't know what we were looking at.
Janesville City Council member Heather Miller says concerns started after she was sent an email from April of 2025, before the advisory board was even formed.
That was long before we had even discussed who would be part of this rehabilitative board.
That email, sent by Rock County Economic Development Manager James Otterstein, outlines steps tied to a potential data center project near Beloit, including how a water study could be used more broadly.
Knowing that there's a preconceived notion that maybe he's supportive of a data center in the township of Beloit.
In the email, Otterstein writes, the studies could provide, quote, an added layer of cover and create a bigger picture approach. Miller says that raises questions about whether he can be unbiased while serving on the board. In an email to the city manager, Miller wrote Otterstein should have disclosed his prior involvement, adding it does not provide a good, independent, and unbiased source for redevelopment decisions. But city manager Kevin Lehner says he does not plan to remove Otterstein from the board, pointing to his decades of experience and calling him an essential connection to the development community.
I definitely am a bit taken back by the dismissiveness. I feel like it's a bit dismissive.
Rock County's administrator echoed what Lehner said, telling WMTV the county does not see a conflict of interest. In a statement, John Light says, quote, while there might be competing economic development interests, there are not conflicting interests. We are all Rock County.
This was not just an accidental, oh, I forgot to tell you. It was an intentional conversation or 2 or 3 or 10 that's been had.
And as for what happens next, Miller says she still believes Otterstein should either step down or be removed from the board. Live in studio, Shayna Najawan, WMTV 15 News.
Shayna, thank you. The GM Jatco Advisory Board is expected to continue these discussions on redevelopment options for that site, including potential data center proposals.